That is all that is. And it was for reasons of giving the community a sense of not being a foreclosed issue, that was put in there. Not because we wanted 6 different locations to actually be seriously considered or that we don't know what we're doing. It was because we wanted them to be able to be expansive and we wanted them to understand that we value their input. As far as hardscape in the park, there are now over 170 parking places in the park. We had a presentation at the Friends of the Library, where a library that is over 40,000 square feet in Colorado doesn't have anywhere near that number of parking places, which means that our library, which could be 10,000, 8,000, 11,000, we don't know, that's going to be something that would be determined by the community, could end up using far fewer than those parking places, and who knows, we might be able to get rid of a whole bunch of them. There could be a whole lot less hardscape at the park. That would be for you and your compatriots in this town to help determine, not us. With regard to flexibility and the fact that the world is a changing place, we have considered that at the steering committee. We have talked about it at the Joint Powers Association group, which is the group of towns that form part of the Library Association. And yes, it is changing. People are turning to e-books. People are reading newspapers in hard copy. And so libraries have to change along with it. But there is still a need for historical libraries. And maybe you have historical type materials of books in libraries. And there is definitely a need for that E kind of material in libraries. Computers. There's a need for music materials. There's a need for access to the e-materials that people don't have. When you hear that libraries are charging $80 for non-resident cards, or even in some cases for residents to have access, when you hear that there's a downturn in the economy, which is when libraries become far more important, it's been shown throughout the country, than when we are prosperous, libraries do take on an inordinate importance. And that includes e-libraries. That's what we are considering. We are providing, or attempting to provide, for that specific kind of flexibility. A library which is not determined by status. A library that brings in teenagers, which brings in older people, which brings in the transitional nature of what a library should be, which brings in our archives, which are pushed together in that room, and you don't even know, probably most of you, that they exist, or certainly have never had access to them. Which brings in the arts program in this town. Have you ever been to the art exhibit, and do you know how many artists there are in this town? Which would make it a gallery where artists would actually be able to show their works in this town without any cost to us, and we would be able to see, enjoy, participate in a shared experience, not only in seeing what they do, but in a room perhaps where we actually participate in an art project, funded by the library, not by you having to put in more money, but by funds that are already there that you've already paid for with your tax dollars. That's what we're thinking about. We're not thinking about more stacks that you can't reach. We're not thinking about, making it so that it's a brick and mortar building that's going to take up more space at the park. We are not thinking about what we want. We're thinking about opening it up to the community. That's all we asked for from this council, was that you allow us to hold community outreach meetings where we're putting up posters, we sent out the cards, we even thought of utilizing the police system where we could have calls to the residents, but we thought maybe that would be too obtrusive, where every resident could receive a phone call saying, here, we're having this meeting. But we've tried every way we can to get every resident involved because we want resident input. We don't have answers. The architects won't have answers because they're not residents of Atherton. We want to know what you want. We don't have the answers. We want you to give us your thoughts. But it's not going to be determined up here. And it really saddens me to hear council members say, well, don't move too fast and we want the architect's rendering. They've given us renderings. We have lots of renderings. The reason we don't show the renderings is because we don't want you to prejudge the issue or feel that that's the way it has to be. We want you to tell us what you want it to be. We want your thoughts about what you think it should be, what you desire it should be. That's what being an inclusive society is all about. It's not council telling you what it should be. It's not the architect telling you what it should be. It's not our committee telling you what it should be. And that's why the 6 sites. That's why you don't see architectural renderings. That's why when we made up these criteria, we had a chart with pluses and minuses and zeros. And you know what? Those were our pluses and those were our minuses and those were our zeros. And we said, the heck with it. Those are our limited considerations. Take them all out because they're meaningless as far as where this project should ultimately go. We want to hear from the community. We want them to put in the pluses, the minuses, and the zeros after the charrettes are held. And that's where we would like to go. And we have to begin somewhere. We are at the point where we do have artists' renderings. We do have the architect's thoughts about the various sites. We do have drawings. We do have about as much input as we could possibly have at this point, except for the community. And if we don't go forward now, those funds will just sit there. And you'll have a library that continues to be non-responsive to the community. If you want to go to San Carlos, fine, if that's really what you want. But if you want a library that is responsive to you and your needs, if you want a library where you can download your books on your Kindle, if you want a library where you can go in and use a computer and listen to music and hear a story, or make a story yourself about the history of Atherton, if you can enjoy the archives in a way that we've never been able to before without buying a copy of Down Under the Oaks for $60 or $70 and then only seeing a very small part of what the history of this town is about, then you've got to sign on to at least open up the process and continue. And that's all we are asking you do. Open your eyes, open your ears, and open your mind to allow this process to continue. Thank you.
I'm going to reserve my comments until after the public has had an opportunity to speak. So I will now ask the public for their comments on this item.
My name is Denise Kupperman, I'm 74 Atherton Avenue, and I'm the chair of the Atherton Library Building Steering Committee. And I would ask any of the other committee members to weigh in on this. Certainly, we understand that this is an important issue and needs to be well considered. This committee has been meeting for about a year. It was formed in August of 2010. And all our meetings are open to the public and have been published, and anybody is welcome. And we encourage people to come. We actually wish there was more community participation. And as part of this, we hired a group 4 with the consent of the council, and their scope of work was included and considered by you. And part of that work is to work with a consultant on library design to establish some idea of what the program in the spaces would be. And focus groups were done with members of the community, library users, including students of MA, many of whom have not really used the library, but would love to have a library, that local library that they could use. And this has been part of our process to sort of get an understanding of the types of spaces and programs that the community would be interested in. And the results of that work, along with some initial environmental study work that is being done under and coordinated by our planning department. All of these things will be discussed and presented and shared with the community in our meetings that we are proposing later this month. We had originally planned on only one, based on some comments. We felt that maybe an additional evening meeting would be helpful. and we hope to go forward. This is an important process, and what we're proposing is a process. The criteria that we have outlined are very typical and standard of evaluating any sort of site evaluation. If you've got questions of me or the group, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Excuse me. I'm Walter Sleep, I live at 227 Catalpa Drive. While I understand the concerns Councilman Carlson and Whitmer have made, Kathy, I think you've done a remarkably good job of explaining that we're still at the beginning of this, and that going ahead with these meetings, as I see here, as I look at the whole thing, I don't think it's going to hurt anybody. And it's time we did move ahead. I have 2 grandsons, and we regularly go to the library over here, and certainly we would enjoy going to the park as well. So for my part, I put in a plug. Let's go ahead with this and move on. Thank you.
Okay, who else?
Yeah, Lauren Grinner, and I just want to applaud everybody for working on it. I know it's a lot of work and a lot of time to put into this kind of thing, and I certainly have loved having the library close by, and my kids have enjoyed it, my mom's used it, I've used it, and I think it's great to have all the technology for the next week, but I send my kids to the library because I don't want them on the computer. I want them to actually read a book, so I think it's nice to be able to have a library that's all inclusive of letting us move forward with technology, but also keeping the community alive. And that's what's been great from the time the kids have been really little all the way up. So thank you. I think you should keep moving.
Okay, are there any other public comments?
Yes, I would be interested in knowing whether the library steering committee, I missed one comment about students, which might have already been mentioned, but I'd like to know what evidence there is that the current library is not meeting the needs of the town. I'd be interested in seeing if anybody has data about the teenagers, middle school and teenagers' use of our library in the last, say, 10 years. I taught English for many years, and it was an credit. We had to have it, and they did use it. I have the feeling there is much less use of it now, and I would suggest that we need to relate that to these plans. And in this fiscal crisis or difficulty, whichever group you're in and discussing it tonight, I have doubts about the value of going again with the library planning or the town center. That seems to be what we should take on. If we can't hire and keep people who work for the town, we have to lay off 13 people, maybe we should table the library and the town center and the accompanying costs that go along with it to help with the immediate problems that we have, which I suspect are more than just an annual problem.
Rosemary, to be responsive, yes, there have been studies for a number of various groups, including teens, and you can follow those results. They are not using the library, but they would if various changes were made, and we have studied those issues. We discussed them at our last meeting, for our meeting last Friday, with the architects and with a specialist who looks into all of these different issues and has conducted focus groups with a number of different age groups. And she can give you all the results, but no, they are not using it, but there are things that can be done with the new library that would bring them in. With regard to the library, all of the funds are there, and we projected out the various costs, and there are charts and costs, and we have all that analysis done, thanks in large part to Jamie Nile. But for even at the most expensive, biggest library we could think of, all but $1.2 million would be paid for, and the library, the JPA, has indicated that they would be willing to float a very minimal, if at no cost, interest loan, which would be paid for by the $750,000 in donor funds that the city gets per year. The library also, and those donor funds are restricted for library purposes only. We have the money in an account for library purposes only. This is not something that we be taking away from other purposes from the town or the employees or other staff. This is not something that we have to go out and raise money for. The money is there, sitting in an account. Moreover, the library has suggested that they would help with maintenance of the park, which has been an ongoing issue, how to maintain the park. And the building that would be built would be a town asset, would be owned by the town, and would become, in essence, another community center. So,
The needs studies.
Yes.
Will those be available at these meetings at the end of
yes,
the?
they are available now.
And where are they available?
They're available, they're available at the library. And are they online as
They're on
well?
the website. No, it's the town website.
I'll take a look.
Yes, and they have been for a long time. I mean, they're,
Well, I haven't been involved, except I did hear the February presentation.
but if you speak with Corinne, the results of many of these studies Corinne has, and they are online, and she can give you the name of the woman, Kathy, and so can our architect, who's here, our lead architect from Group 4.
I just see, I need to be convinced that we need something other than what we have in terms of a building. Obviously, we need some upgrading of
And-
email.
And also
I
with
mean,
regard to
electronic.
Children's Center, there is major need for upgrade, but
Okay,
you
good
can,
luck.
you can read about it and discuss it with our architect.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments?
Excuse me.
I thought this subject with the library has gone on a really long time. It's not like it just took place yesterday. And if the funding is there, where we're not gonna say, okay, the funding's there, and by the way, a house costs this much to build and it ends up costing a whole lot more, where you end up like with Paul Hema's situation, where the money's not there, so it's gonna sit there and not be built, so on and so forth, because people do run into costs like that. I think it should move forward. It would be great to have any sense of community where people could meet, where people could do things. I've seen news reports where it's really cool. They have like internet cafes and they have this and they have that. So it was a place for people to meet and to get together where they're not having to clean up their homes and shut their bedroom doors because they haven't made their bed that day. So I do like that because this particular library is a little bit too small. As I do say, move forward, but again, my concern is to have another Paul Hemas or to have something like that where we do say, what, we had all the money, well, poof, you have all the money, but sometimes construction is more than you think it is.
We have even paid for our own legal opinion with regard to the site, and we're paying for any staff time that is being utilized in this. So we are not utilizing Atherton staff without paying for it.
Are there any other public comments? Joan?
Joan Sanders. I just wish that the council members who feel this is going too fast would take a look at the town center and see how many respondents there were to the town center surveys. I worked on the Blue Ribbon Committee for the town center for months and months. I know nothing about it now. And as far as I know, the town center is wanting to go ahead with plans for buildings when there is no money. And we don't even know the size of the town staff that we're going to have. So I think that the library project has been very open. We have tried to get the public involved, and I think the only way we can truly get the public involved and excited about this is to have these town meetings where people can come and review all the materials and get excited about something that we have the money for, we can build, and it can be a really good, feel-good thing for the town.
So I would like to respond.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, the town center is not going ahead with plans or building. Town center is having a competition with 3 architects pro bono at no cost to the town to create conceptual designs from which to bring back to the town in numerous charrettes, numerous town meetings to get public input before anything is decided. So it's going very slowly. Now, there was not a survey done from the town, and you're misunderstanding my comments. I'm not saying that the library should not go forward. And the impassioned speech from Councilmember McKeithen is very impassioned. I've got history of librarians and school teachers and, educators and literary master's degrees in my family. I love books, I love the hardbacks, and I love libraries. It's not that. I want the library to go forward. I just don't want us to, as a council, and as a town, to do spot planning and piecemeal planning. We have limited resources. Our park is a limited resource. And, we have got to go forward with a new town center, one way or another. We believe that we can raise the money privately without burdening the town at all. For instance, this is a side note, but there is the baseball program at UC California, Berkeley, was eliminated last fall. A group of private residents came together, raised $10 million within 3 months. And you know where that baseball team is right now, today? They're in Omaha, Nebraska at the World Series. And so if, a group of residents want to get behind something to do it, they can do it. Portola Valley did raise private funds for their town hall. We can do that too, but we have to create the vision. I have no problem with the library. I just want us to do it right. Seeing this little spot plan with everything just spotted all over the park, options 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with the option of the existing facility, that's one thing. I think that we need to look at it holistically. That's all I want to do. I don't want to rush into anything. And it does give me a little bit of pause that 148 respondents for a library needs survey has fueled this engine and put us on this track. There's only 148 respondents, and I think the majority of the residents had no idea what that was about. So,
Are there any other public comments?
I have to speak. I've been involved probably for 2 years now because I was working on the Blue Ribbon Task Force, and the library has met for a year, and there's been tremendous work done. We've gone to conferences, we've visited libraries, we've studied the 21st century. Hours and hours and hours have been put into looking at how to make this the library of the 21st century. And it's going to be a community meeting place. It's not just going to be stacks and books. It's going to have art from the county, the town, and it's going to have the history next door, and a place that people can see it and people can meet there. Teenagers can have rooms to study. We can have meetings, and it's going to be a beautiful place, indoor and outdoor, and connecting with the pavilion and other parts of the library. It's going to be a community center that we can be proud of. And I think the idea of it being short-sighted is not something that should be ever thought of. That you can't believe the amount of hours that have been put into this.
Okay. Are there any other public comments?
Denise Kupperman, I've spoken before, but I'll speak very briefly. I do want to address the subject or the topic of the idea of spot planning. And we really don't think that we're looking at spot planning here in any way. If you look at the criteria is really criteria that you would do for any sort of site assessment, and it is a planning exercise. We have planners. We are spending a great deal of money on consultants to guide us through this, and the community as well. We want to hear from the community as to what their thoughts are. And the sites that are open to the library at this point and were brought before this council about a year ago were to evaluate the existing site and the park. And we are in the process of doing exactly what we were chartered to do. And so I am a little bit surprised that it is this notion of spot planning. What you see in your diagrams is really just to allow people to visualize or start to assess the possibilities. And we hope to have that public conversation later this month. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? If none, and seeing none, I will bring it back to the council. And I'm going to make some public comments ahead of the other council members at this stage. First of all, I think we need to read what this thing says. It says, review and approve the criteria for site selection and process and schedule for site selection for the new Atherton Library. We're not asking for any decisions on the library here. We're asking for decisions on the site selection criteria. And if all the council members will read those site selection criteria, I think it would probably be hard to find any others that we could add, but I'm sure we'd be happy to, the library committee would probably be happy to add any if we can. I also think that just as many other people have said, this would be a wonderful library. I think it would be a community, it's somewhat of a community center. And I also believe that if we slow this down tonight, when all we're asking the council for is to approve those site selection criteria, it's going to be a real kick in the teeth to the library committee. And I think that that would be very, very negative for the town. The library committee may decide they no longer want to be involved. They've done a wonderful job here. So I would just ask the council if they would please read what we're trying to approve tonight and make sure that they're not trying to think that we're making a decision on the library. These public hearings are specifically to hear what the public wants. And all we're wanting to go tonight is to go forward with the public hearings. If you have different times for the public hearings, I think we'd be happy to put in different times, but please read what we're trying to approve here. So I would now turn it over to any other members of the council.
Thank you, Kathy, for your, I sincerely mean that, your explanation there. You talked about being very open, but I did hear comments that talked about a breezeway from the library to the pavilion and things like that. Make one wonder just how open some of the decision making is. But the site criteria, Mr. Mayor, I think there ought to be other stakeholders that are also clueless about the site criteria, other users of the park, play school people. I don't think it. I think the site criteria that we have here tonight is very much one that's been put together by the library folks, and doesn't appear to take into account sufficiently the possible impacts it may have on other users of the park. I endorse the idea of a master plan for our facilities. I think that we would have one for the ground, for the park. Certainly the facilities is equal importance. Maybe it ought to be a master facilities plan for the town and not just for the park. If we're worried about being able to spend money, I have a solution. Our public school libraries are being hit hard in cutbacks in education dollars. Personally, right now, I would rather see a more modest library project, along with setting up a program of grants to the libraries of the public elementary schools in our town. Think what a $250,000 grant each to Los Alamitos, Selby, Encinal, and Laurel would do in helping to ensure the kids in these schools have enough access to library materials. These grants might be used to expand the hours of usage, including perhaps serving the adult community by putting on special programs, some directed towards families such as English language learning programs, help them to find better jobs, and be better able to help the kids in getting through school. This is something that could be done immediately. And a long-term program could be set up on an ongoing basis funded by the excess library tax money. This, in my mind, would be a much more effective outreach to community beyond our borders and would show that Atherton cares about our neighbors. I think this result in a level of community pride that we all could feel as part of would certainly be much more fun than a great new library. Where I am at the moment, I think we do need a cooling off period. We need a rest. Maybe we need a joint meeting with the library committee where we can discuss the alternatives to building a large new regional library. I think the objectives of such a meeting should be the development of a town poll to ask the residents who pay the library taxes how they think the funds should be used, including outright grants to public school libraries. We need to develop a scope for the facilities master plan that encompasses all the services the town is providing, including the library, and including whatever steps are made in terms of how the delivery of town services changes in the future. Meanwhile, we have a 2 or 3 month cooling off period to regroup and see what the community feels about how we should use the funds collected for the library, to rethink the size and footprint of the library construction. I think it might be a very good step on our point.
Kathy?
I think, Jerry, what you're trying to do is this cooling off period will basically be a death knell, not a cooling off period. I moreover think you're trying to substitute your judgment for the judgment of the people by saying what it is you think should be done. And I think the judgment of the people is something that would come forward from having these meetings and going forward. I also, you talk about listening to the other stakeholders. I think you should be attending some of these meetings, or at least speak with Group 4, because we have spoken with virtually every stakeholder we can think of. And the fact that you don't know that is an indication that you really don't understand how much we've put into this process. We have done that extensively. This is a project that has an opportunity like no other project in town to bring this town together if you allow it to do so. We have had lawsuits, we have had bad press, we have had grand jury reports, we have had layoffs. And here we have an opportunity to do something positive. And the fact that people aren't even allowing the process to go forward to see if it is going to be positive is something that is an enigma. But it's an enigma, I think, because of our own personal interests. And I think we should put that aside and see what the community feels. There was another point that I wanted to make, and it's with regard to something that you said. It will come to me. Go ahead.
Bill?
The public schools. It was the public schools. You said give grants to the public schools. What a mistake that would be. And this is something else, because you haven't attended our meetings, you're not aware of. Menlo Atherton recently built a new library. One would think that if we gave grants to schools, that would be the panacea. It is not. The fact is, they do not do outreach in the way that we have done outreach, and they do not create flexible libraries the way we are hoping to build a flexible library. They do not look to actually prepare their libraries that are responsive to the people that they serve. Because the fact of the matter is, when we had our team group, and we asked them whether or not that library serves them, they said no. They don't go to that library because it's not responsive to their needs. So that's a perfect example of where money would have been very poorly spent had we given a grant to Menlo Atherton and said, here, we're going to make that library even bigger. That is exactly what we're trying not to do. We are trying to do outreach. We are trying to do focus groups. We have spoken with stakeholders. And I suggest that before you pass judgment on us, that you do some of the homework and follow up with what it is we've done, because we have done those things. And at least, as I've said before, allow this process to proceed with an open mind. We are not asking anything more than that you approve these criteria and allow public input.
So I just have a few comments. Number one, I think I said earlier, I think I've been branded with, I said no, and I didn't say no. I did say that I think that having a revised, improved library system, as long as it met the criteria of the 21st century, and had meeting spaces and things like that might be a good opportunity. I'm concerned, not concerned, I'm surprised that we're going to be consistent with the park master plan, because when we've talked about the hoop house, when we've talked about the Little League taking over the park, I've brought up several times, where is the master plan? And no one ever says we have one. So if we have one, I'd certainly like to get a copy of it, because I don't think that there is a real master plan, forward-looking master plan for the park. I think Jerry had a good comment about, are the right stakeholders being involved. You know, the Little League, we said, hey, thanks a lot, thanks for bringing it to our attention, go to the planning commission and touch base with them on the location. I assume that eventually they'll get involved. I do think that we need to get community input. I'd be very interested in making sure that we understand what the community input is and what the Atherton input is. Because as I mentioned in my previous conversation, if we're going to build a new library and we're using Atherton property tax assessments, and we need to make sure that the Atherton input is really the major criteria. And a lot of the criteria that seems to be coming from some of the survey information that I've seen and from the presentations that I've attended, when they've come to the council meetings, has been that there's a fair amount of usage and there's a fair amount of needs and input coming from outside of Atherton, not necessarily from within Atherton. And it's Atherton tax dollars that are going to be funding this. And so our needs come first. It's our park as well. So as we're running these we decide to move forward, as we're running these surveys, it would be good to understand the input that we're getting from the Atherton residents as opposed to the area residents. Lastly, I think that one of the key things here in the criteria that I'd like to make sure that we address, these are all great esoteric things, but the question is, how big a library do we really need? How big a library do we really want? How many